Good morning, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this morning's session on Europe, Africa Data Space, Cooperation for the SDGs. This is a very interesting session. There was a lot of strong effort from my colleague at ILVO in Belgium to get us into this session. So we are hoping that by the end of this session, that effort will be well worth it in terms of what can be possible based on our interactions, hearing from the speakers and hearing from yourselves as the delegates. The session is exploring joint cooperation and joint development of interoperable data spaces with immense potential to connect Africa and Europe to drive sustainable agricultural innovation. Jürgen is a professor in agricultural engineering, and the rest of the details are in the program. Please familiarize yourself with that. And what is most important is what, the concept that he is bringing here to Africa. While the Belgian organization VITO is a partner with the CSIR in the G-STIC program, ILVO is not inside that partnership, but they have strategically identified an opportunity to bring some of their technical expertise, their broad services that they provide to Europe as an organization, and they want to expand that into Africa. And we hope that with your inputs, we will have good feedback and probably a structured way of working. And among us here, my colleague told me that if I start saying who she is, she will walk out of the session. But I just want to acknowledge that this being an agriculture session, there's a colleague who is a technical advisor to the Portfolio Committee of Agriculture in the Parliament of the Republic. And so we're excited that this discussion should also be reflected at that particular setting. So welcome you all. Welcome to our speakers. Jürgen, we will invite you to the floor. We have 3 speakers, colleagues, and we will also allocate you 30 minutes of discussions, which we haven't had in the other sessions because they've been pretty cramped and all of that. So you will speak to us for the allocated time. 20 minutes. And then we will then call the other speaker. So he is the keynote speaker. He has conceptualized this whole idea, as we say that his effort to bring this here was quite tenacious. So welcome, and we look forward to the engagement.
I will start the time now. First of all, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. All delegates, thank you very much to give me the opportunity here to talk. I'm not so good with protocols, so they told me I need to say all protocols are observed. So I hope with this way I have expressed my gratitude for you to be here and to take your time to listen to my story. I will try to explain you what data spaces are about, and I will tell you. Probably I will not be able to explain it in 20 minutes, but I hope I can give you a first idea about it, and then we can discuss about it further. Who has already worked with the concept of data spaces? Okay, so we can only make improvements, and I cannot make any mistakes because it's a new story for all of you. Okay, so, oh yeah, don't worry. Maybe I think it's always important if we want to work together in the future that we know each other, and I will be brief. I'm a director at Ilvo now, but I actually started my career, and I think I was even born as an agricultural engineer. I'm crazy about machinery, and I collect them at home, but I'm also trying, well, maybe I turned a little bit over from being an engineer to the dark side of management and business development, and not anymore the pure engineering. But I try to stay an ambassador of digital agri-food, because I truly believe that digital farming and digital food can bring solutions to work more sustainable. And I do my work as an ambassador already very early with the small farmers' sons at big European fairs. I try to explain them how the red tractor needs to talk to the green tractor to create interoperability and to exchange data. So we start very early in explaining this. But I said I was born as an agricultural engineer. I was also born in Ilvo because I worked there 25 years. So that's quite a long time, actually. And this is the Flemish Research Institute for Agriculture, Fishery and Food. And our mission is to make agriculture, fisheries and food more sustainable. We do this first in Belgium, then first in Flanders, then in Belgium, in Europe. But we are also working now for the rest of the world. And we have around 800 fantastic people doing that. They're trying to work independent, on a scientifically based, but we are doing applied research, which means less not into the fundamental things, but more those things that can be used in a rather short term in the market. We work very closely with the businesses, and we are about developing things that the farmer and the businesses around the farmer and in the food industry can be used as soon as possible. We say that we work on the 5Gs. It works very nice in Flanders, but for us it means, if you translate it to English, we actually lose the connection with the G, but we are working on healthy primary production, healthy environments, healthy food processing, healthy consumptions, and healthy social economic relationships. And I will, of course, share my slides, so I will not read everything here, but this shows that we are working very broadly on all sectors from farm to fork, also bioeconomy, for instance, public and non-profit sector, and food production. But this slide is important for me. Our DNA is about working together. It's about system thinking. It's about being value-driven, and it's about co-creation. We always build things together with the end users, and we try to involve the end user as soon as possible to avoid that some engineers build a fantastic machine that nobody wants to use. So that's why we involve the end user, the companies, as soon as possible. Just to give you an idea, in 2024 we submitted 80 European proposals. So we are getting a lot of our funding from that, and you can see a lot of our partners here, Vito being in the middle, and we are not direct a partner yet of G-STIC, but we would be more than happy to explore how we can support more. But I also put it in this slide because since some years we have a strong Africa-Europe task force at our institute, and we are working with all these institutes, and we have been already submitting proposals with them. And I would be very glad if we could expand to also working with you in the future. To give you some ideas on what we are doing in these Europe-Africa collaborative projects already, digital twins, IoT sensor networks, large language models in AI, but also still the physical-based models, mostly on ventilation strategies and renewable energy, to give you an idea what we're already doing. But enough talking about us. Let's talk about why I'm really here. Why do we want to share data? I think at the moment we cannot even underestimate the importance of data. Data is everywhere, and data is a very important resource and fuel for the future. And I will give you some concrete examples. In Belgium, a Belgian farmer, when he installs his farm management system, it took him some years ago a long time because he needs to install a lot of things. He needs to indicate all the parcels he has to upload data. Thanks to our data space that shares all the historic data, all the IoT data coming from his sensors, but also data coming from the Belgian government on where are his parcels, what is he growing. He pushes one button and everything flows into the system. So companies selling farm management systems, they want to work with the data space, because if the farmer buys their system with a connection with the data space, in 5 minutes everything is installed, and otherwise it takes him 1 hour to do everything. But also, if we talk about tractors and machinery, In my country, there are a lot of environmental rules, and you need to have a PhD to understand what you can do as a farmer, actually, without breaking any environmental rules. The data space makes that all the rules are fully automatically uploaded into the machine. So for the first time ever, we're really building this smart machine. So the fertilizer machine or the sprayer machine knows automatically how close it can get to the water, for instance, and how much it can fertilize thanks to the data that is automatically loaded into the system. But also the factories. We have, the data space works also together with smart potato processing factories, because these guys want to know which size of potato is coming in the coming days, so they can adapt to produce for McDonald's long French fries, to produce for some restaurants that want short French fries. So the machinery in the field can automatically send the size of the potatoes that is coming to these factories. This is what a data space can create impact for. The same with retail and consumers. Many of these apps are actually that say if your food is sustainable or not when you buy it, are based on average information. With the data space, we can give the client, the consumer in the retail, from the retailers, data from the real farms. So because farms are doing very well, and sometimes they're doing better than average scores, so they are engaged to send in their own data rather than having the average data. Our governance is also using the data space, because what we have in Flanders is a bit a problem with what we call calendar farming. It means that farmers are set by law, now you can fertilize, now you can do this, now you can do that. We want to shift to a system that is more result-driven, where a farmer can use the data to say to the government, look, I did my management, and in the end of the season, I will show that my soil is in a good condition, and I will do this based on the data. So the farmer can become, again, a manager, and he doesn't need to follow quick rules. He can do his own management, and in the end, thanks to the data, he can show whether he has done a sustainable business or not. And of course, we also use it to share the data with researchers, and there are a lot of data platforms actively nowadays that are building their businesses around this data sharing. If we want to do this nice story that I just told, we need access to qualitative data, we need security, trust, and fair use, we need interoperability and scalability and a clear governance. And in Europe, we got this through these 5 big acts: the Data Governance Act, the Data Act, the Digital Market Act, the Digital Service Act, and the AI Act. This is like a kind of the Bible for us to treat our data. But what does that bring? All these fancy words for the farmers. And not only the farmers, the businesses around them. What is, in my opinion, but I would like to hear what you think, the biggest burden at the moment for farmers?
Local regulation.
Yes, spot on. We didn't do this beforehand, so indeed, administrative burden, following the regulations, doing paperwork, doing over and over the same paperwork. You send it to the government, but you also need to send it to your retailer, and that is where we wanted to help farmers. And we did that in the beginning by giving them an app. We gave them an app to say, okay, I will send to my fertilizer how much fertilizer machine, how much I fertilize, and then I can send this data to the government. But we gave them an app for fertilizing, we gave them an app for seeding, we gave them an app how to feed their cows, and they're actually at the moment overwhelmed by apps. And the farmer is like, okay, I have to type it in app number 1, I have to type it in app number 2. Why can't these apps just talk to each other, so I have only to put it in once? And that is where we see a great possibility for what we call data spaces. There are 9 data spaces being developed at the moment. Of course, without any question, the most important is agriculture, of course, because that's our topic, of course. You have to be a little bit putting your topic first, of course. But the idea of this data space is to bring all these data sets together and to let it flow from one into another. So a very simple definition of a data space is actually it is an ecosystem that's mostly defined by a sector, also by an application, but mostly by a vertical, like there is one for energy, there is one for agriculture, where we work decentralized. And that means that we are not, and that's very important, we are not bringing all the data together into one pile, into one data hub. We leave the data where it is. So the fertilizer company has data, the feeding company has data, the laboratories have soil data, the data stays there. Only when we need the data, at that moment we bring it together and we let it flow. So the owner of the data always stays in control of his data, and that is very important. A data space is about data sovereignty. It's about making sure that the person, the farmer or the company that created the data keeps the data under control. We don't want the data flow to other players and then they create value with it and the people who own the data are not rewarded. That's very important for a data space. So I will, okay, I have another 9 minutes left, so I think we will make it. I will try to explain it why it's so important. Let's say that you have a very nice startup and it's developing a sustainability calculation app. You have an app that can explain to a farmer what is his climate impact score. For instance, in my country and in many countries, the banks want to know these things. What is the climate impact score? Because it will have an influence on your loans. They will give you better conditions if you have a lower climate impact score. If you want to do this now, you need to go to the fertilizer company and ask how much fertilizer does this farmer buy. Then you need to ask him how much feed does his cow eat this year, and you need to go to the feeding producing company. You need to know in what condition are his soils. You need to go to their soil laboratory and get the data there. Maybe you also want to know how much medicines he used to treat his cows. You need to go to the vets. So you need to run to at least 10, 15 players to ask for the data. And each time you need to make a deal with these players, and you need probably make a lot of deals, and you need also to ask consent of the farmer, because how much fertilizer the farmer used is in the fertilizer company, but it's the farmer who owns this information, so he needs to say, yes, you can go there and use it. That's a lot of paperwork, a lot of work. So that means that each time you also need to ask the farmer. And when you collect all this data, when the fertilizer company changes their IT system, your application will not work anymore because you lose the connection. So we call it the kind of spaghetti that exists, because you are connected to all these data users and data providers with your app. And for a small company like you, if you want to start a startup, that's very difficult. So what we change when we make a data space is we make it circular. In a data space, the data space is connected to this fertilizer company. It's connected to the feed company. All the data sets, they all have APIs. And if you then come with your app and you say, look, from the 5,000 Belgian farmers, I want to know how much fertilizer they use, how they feed their cows. I want to have a lot of information. Then you can just plug into the system, and the system will send your demand to all these companies asking for it. And very important, the farmer will always be in between with a button to say, yes, the data can go there or not. I will try to explain it a little bit different, or with another way. This is the app builder. He asks to the data space, do you have the data of 5,000 farmers? The data space will say, yes, we have this data, and we have all the companies that you want, but you need to ask the farmer. And if the farmer says yes, then the data can flow to the application. That is how it works. So what do we have? We have one clear data market. You can go to the website of this. There's a Belgian data space active at the moment. I will show you. You can go to our website. It's, the name is DjustConnect. We have one open platform, so we are a very open community. Everybody can go there. We have one dashboard, so the farmer has a dashboard, and he will see, okay, this new application is asking for my data. There will be clearly explained how long do we need the data, what are we going to use for. So the bank can use it one time for a certain application. If they want to use it for something else, they need to ask again. And they also need to make an agreement with the farmer. For instance, you will get the better loan, or you will get the application for free. There's always a deal for the farmer. And we have one contract. We worked very hard on that with our lawyers. We have one contract that works as well for the companies as for them, for the farmers. Not so easy to make that. And it's not every other company gets another contract. No, the banks have the same contract than any of our other clients. So we work for farmers. They can get better advice, they can have less administration. We work for data providers. We make sure that it's legally covered, that they get IT support. And we work, of course, finally for the data user. To showcase that I'm not just telling a fancy story, you can go to this website and you will see that there are already, I think, around 50 companies that are offering their data, and that if you want to use the data, you can just click and you will go into the system to get to the data. But what is very nice, and why I'm also here today, is that we are not the only ones doing this. In Flanders, we have a front runner, but you will see that all over Europe, these platforms are getting established. Some of them are less mature. Some of them are taking their first step. It's also a difficult business model. It's not so easy to survive as a platform. But what we are now trying to do, taking the next step in Europe, is connecting all these platforms. So because what is the problem? Our customer will say, yeah, Jürgen, it's very nice that in Belgium I can get the data through your platform, but I sell my machinery in Finland, and there is a Finnish farmer, and he wants also to say, yes, the data from my potato harvester can go to the Belgian processing company or to the Finnish processing company. But I'm not connected to this Belgian platform. How is this going to work? There's a Finnish platform. But my customer is not going to pay in Belgium to be connected and then pay again in Finland. So they want that the data can flow from the Finnish platform over the Belgian platform to the potato processor. So there is quite some work to be done to connect all these platforms. Technically, but most of all, business-wise and governance. So this is what we are doing, and we have a very large European project. I think it's a 60 million euro project to get this all connected. So that is what we will do, and the project is called the Common European Agricultural Data Space, and it's about deploying this ID over the whole Europe. But okay, my question then. That's all very nice, and you use innovation money. Is there some real impact, and are you doing real things? Well, look, at the moment we have 4,000 farmers in Belgium who use it every day. There are only 20,000 farmers in Flanders, so we will have now 1/4 of the market. And as we have some very important data sets, day by day, all farmers need to start using the platform. By the way, the platform is free to use for farmers. It are the companies that pay yearly subscription fees to use it, if you want to know something a little bit about our business model. And you will see that these are all the companies at the moment that work for us. I must say that it's very difficult to convince a farmer to share his data. And in the beginning, people were selling these things like data is the new oil and we will all get rich and the farmer will get paid for his data. And then I ask I do a lot of talk, who is earning real money with data sharing? Nobody. Instead, maybe if Google or Apple would be in the room, they would say, yes, we are. But these small companies are struggling to make money. And promising the farmer money for his data, it doesn't work, because if you tell him that his data is worth money, then he will for sure keep it, because he will say, okay, this is a valuable thing, I need to close it and keep it with me. I'm not going to share it with you. So what we told them is, if you share your data, you will have less administration. Instead of being there and typing from one app in another and copying paperwork on Sunday morning, you can go with your kids to a nice place and the data space will do the work for you. And that's how we got them stepping into the system. So we convinced them that by farm identification system, their soil analysis, their parcel information, all these things flow automatically into their applications for quality checks. But the very important one, these two are all sustainability related apps. It's about the sustainability calculation of your farm. This is about the soil sustainability. A lot of our applications, and that is the link with the SDG also, are about sustainability applications. And we help them complying with these applications with less work. And then later, when they share their data, we ask them, by the way, if you have your data and we can run an AI algorithm on it, we can also give you advice to better farm. So the first step is administrative burden. Later, we give them smart decisions. And I saw, this is my first time in South Africa, actually, so I don't know so much about the ecosystem, but I talked with some people, and I know you have the livestock identification and traceability system. You're working strongly on precision agriculture, and these are the places where these data systems can be used to share them and to create extra value from the data. And on the opening of the reception opening at the Flemish representation, I met this fantastic company that is doing traceability all along the chain for fisheries. And that's also the kind of companies that we can support with a data space. So this is my last slide. I'm reaching out to you now. Do you think this is a relevant story? Do you think that we can use this to support food security, fair value chains, and climate support farming as well in Africa as in Europe? And can we start thinking on, are you interested in the concept? Are you interested to see also this can work transnationally? I know it's a complex thing, but let's start the discussion here. And I think I'm at 20 minutes and 6 seconds for the moment, so still fine. And this man, I like this quote also because I feel sometimes a little bit guilty. Talking about it is very easy. Farming looks mighty easy when your plow is a pencil and you're 1,000 miles from the cornfield, but if you need to make it work in real life, I know it's difficult.
Thank you very much. Jürgen, can we please give him a resounding round of applause? And so you think it is difficult, but you're trying to make it easy. I think that's the moral of the story here. And thank you very much for your effort. Now, after his presentation, we would like to welcome two South African presenters, because we were quite impressed with this Belgian story, but we thought there's something going on here, and we don't really want to talk so much about what the CSIR is doing. So we wanted to speak to or understand what our South African Space Agency, National Space Agency, SANSA, is doing, particularly their interactions with smallholder farmers, and how much data they are willing to share themselves, and what they share with SANSA. That is what our colleague CEADS will speak to. After CEADS, we will then try and speak to someone that started as a startup out of University of Stellenbosch and has worked also with commercial farmers in the Western Cape, and has ended up in a relationship with the CSIR and other partners in a consortium, Tara Saudi. She will also share a different South African story. And thereafter, we give the audience an opportunity to interact with the presentations by the speakers. So that's how we're going to flow. Unfortunately, you have 15 minutes each. So you don't have his privilege of 20 minutes, so try and stick to your times, because the audience, the participants are also aching to give their own experiences. So welcome to the stage. We will then line up the chairs thereafter for all of you to sit as a panel in the front and then take Q&A. But for now, we start with you, and Tara, you come immediately after. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I don't like that picture, by the way, and I didn't send it to you. So it's basically a picture of me when I was still doing some field work somewhere else, and it does not necessarily speak to the agricultural work that we are doing. But by the way, my name is Siamtanda Kokwe. I am a remote sensing scientist at the South African National Space Agency, who is more into the remote sensing of agriculture. But today, it's not going to be a technical presentation where I'll be discussing pixels and how they help us understand what is going on within the agricultural fields. But what I'll be looking at is more on how the interoperable spaces, data sharing spaces between Africa and Europe can actually assist a smallholder farm who is in the deep rural Eastern Cape to be able to maximize on the outputs that they get from their land that they have. So that is what I'm basically talking about. And then the title of my presentation is going to be looking into revolutionizing smallholder farming through these data sharing interoperable spaces. And this is the outline of what I'm going to be talking about. So where I'll be introducing the key small-scale farming challenges in Africa. I would give an introduction, then I would look at the challenges, because it's critical for us to be able to look at what are some of the challenges that are faced by these farmers and what is the role that these interoperable spaces can then help in sort of like capping some of those challenges that we've actually identified within the smallholder levels, and also would be looking at some of the roles, some of the existing platforms that are there, which we can then utilize within these spaces. And then I'll also look into the summary and bring in some conclusion on some of the work that we are doing. At the South African National Space Agency, we do quite a lot of things that is relating to Earth observations data, because we are the custodians for the Earth observations data, and we are mandated to promote the use of the Earth observations data in various applications, which include agriculture. So some of the examples that I'm going to be giving in this presentation would be examples that are sort of like relating to some of the work that we are doing at the South African National Space Agency, which touch based on the use of Earth observations data, in particularly within the smallholder farming exercises. So just an introduction, basically small-scale farming and subsistence farming, they dominate Africa, and they contribute significantly to the rural economies within the region. Of that, because most of the people that we would find in the African context or in African regions, they sort of like suffer from so many things, including poverty. So now they try and utilize the land so that they can be able to live on. So that is why you'd find in most cases that there's quite a good dominance of the smallholder farms within the regions. And based on the estimates, you would find that there's an estimated number of 33 million of those farms that are located within these regions, which they then contributes about 70% of the production of food within the region. And many of these smallholder farmers, they do the cropping so that they can be able to feed their families. And as a result, some of the leftover from what they then sell it for them to be able to come up with the income that that can then help them to sustain even further what they are basically doing. And as a result, now they form part of the majority food producers within the region. So despite being all this important and also contributing significantly to the food production in the regions, people, about 90% of the people that are in these rural areas, they basically still live under poverty because of some of the challenges that I am actually going to highlight within this presentation, and hoping then to present how then these interoperable spaces can then help them to be able to improve or maximize on whatever activity that they are doing on their land, so that we can then move forward. So one of the key challenges that contributes to the unsuccessfulness of some of the things that they do is basically limited access to information and technology. So I've selected this challenge as one of the key things because I believe that it actually speaks to some of the data sharing spaces, because what you would notice is that most of these farmers, they are located within the rural areas, and because of that, now they have limited access to some of the informations and technologies. And I would like to bring it to you that even some of these platforms that we have, they do exist, but somehow they don't reach the person who is in the deep rural area because they don't have access to these technologies. And as a result, now it becomes difficult for them to be able, for example, to maximize the activities that they are doing. For example, if we talk about climate data, for example, then that climate data is critical because it informs the cropping mechanism and activities and yields that they're going to get from the field. Now, and for them to be able to utilize that data, they need to access it from somewhere. And now that will enable them to sort of like get early warnings about what is going to be happening and what then they need to do for them to be able to maximize under that climatic event that is going to be experienced. So in that event, now what you would get is that they don't have access to such information. And as a result, now they just continuously cropping, even if there's chances for them to be able to utilize the data and be able to improve whatever that they're going to be working on. So with limited access to technology also, it also sort of like caused them to have minimum exposure to sort of like modern farming techniques. For example, if we talk about now precision agriculture, so they don't necessarily understand what precision agriculture is, what is it, and how it can actually help them, because they don't have access to these technologies that introduces them to some of these key things that the precision agriculture is actually introducing to them. So I believe that these data operable sharing spaces would then allow them to be able to have access to all this information that they need. Another challenge that is faced by these smallholder farmings in Africa, there's also financial constraint, limited market access, which my colleague had already explained further, and why it is actually needed to have these spaces so that they can be able to access constraint finances and limited market. Because now with all this because of the fact that they are smallholder farms, some of them, they don't even own the land, and as a result now they can't even get loans from the bank, they can't even get insurances. So which means that even if they experience now a loss of livelihood as a result of climatic events, then no insurance is actually going to cover that. That means it's a loss for them. So which means that now they are also not able to invest in improved seed fertilizers, amongst other things, because they don't have financial, they don't have finances to actually carry on to that task. So those are some of the challenges. And also, one of the key challenges that I've already alluded to is the climate variability and change, which we say that basically they don't have enough access to these smart agricultural tools that allows them to be able to sort of like prevent or to sort of like take preventative measures that would cap the impact of climate variability and change within the regions. So those are some of the key challenges. And then based on those challenges, we then need to sort of like look at in terms of what really needs to be done. I'm not going to go through all those things, but it basically outlines what we probably need to do and how then those data sharing spaces can then assist them in terms of maximizing whatever activity that they are doing. So basically, because we are introducing technologies and tools and solutions to these people, we probably need to sort of like expand on the internet, mobile energy infrastructure to be able to access the digital. So for example, if you are going to the rural Eastern Cape, when you go there, then it becomes difficult to even find the location because of the fact that you don't have a network coverage. So they don't have access to these technologies because of those network coverages. So the first thing that needs to be done before we introduce these things is to expand on that coverage so that it can be able to allow them to better access all these tools that we are sort of like bringing to them. And also we need to somehow develop user-friendly local languages, digital tools. For example, if everything is going to be written in English, it's going to be a problem because when you are dealing with the smallholder farms, you are dealing with people that are in the rural areas who don't have formal education, some of them. So they don't necessarily understand what is going on if you are going to be bringing these sophisticated technologies. In other words, in whatever that you are doing, it probably needs to speak more to them in a language that they can actually understand, in a simple and basic thing that they can actually relate to. And also we need to train them on these digital platforms. For example, we do have the precision agricultural tools and things, but now if you go out and ask them about what, if they are aware of these tools, some of them might be aware of it, but some of them might be not, and some of them might be aware, but they are not using it because they don't understand it. So we sort of like need then to look into how can we then train these people so that they can be able to appreciate these tools that we are probably bringing into them so that they can be able to utilize them. And then these are also some of the things that probably needs to be done. Now I want to come into this slide where I'm going to be looking more into the role of these interoperable data spaces in addressing the challenges that are faced by these small-scale farmers. So for example, if we talk about the challenge that is limited access to timely localized farming, now with these interoperable data sharing spaces, then we've got, they sort of like, as my colleague has explained, that they connect farmers from different areas through these data networks that we are sort of like having. So what we can then do, then they could allow us to be able to sort of like share the lesson learned from Europe and how do they then cap the challenges that they have, and then how can we then take all that information in terms of assisting us in developing all these systems that will talk actually to us. For example, if we talk about climate models that they have already built, we know exactly they are advanced in terms of technologies and innovations with us. Now we take those innovations, we bring them to us. Of course, they need to be trained and calibrated based on the local data set, which would be shared through these platforms that we are having, and then we would be able to build into systems that would directly talk to us in terms of having all these things. And also, now if we are having those, then it would allow us to be able to be in a better position to improve the farming activities that are happening at a local scale, the ones that we are discussing today. And also, if we talk more onto the challenge of the lack of access to credit, insurance, or financial records, then the standardized for farmer profiles and data sharing agreements, of course, they would form part of the data that is within the interoperable shared spaces. And as a result, now it becomes easier to co-develop for banks and other Europe microfinance institutions to make data-informed lending decisions. So all the information will probably be available available, then it becomes easier for these financial institutions that are sponsoring loans and microfinances to be able to invest in these farmers through this sharing of data spaces. And also, the shared tools can then be used to pilot digital credit scoring models, so it becomes easier now to be able to track and score and do the credit scoring which is required by the banks and microfinances when they talk more onto giving people investing in these small-scale farmers and other things. And also, one of the things that we noted is that with the smallholder farms, they're also sort of like vulnerable to climate shocks. So what happens is that now they do need these tools that would probably help them to be able to sort of like put in interventions that would allow them to sort of like manage the impact that is as a result of these climate shocks that they sometimes experience. So with these data shared spaces, as I've already alluded to, they sort of like allow us to be able to gain access to sort of data or that they have at local scale, and then we sort of like get the models that are built by these people that are advanced in the other side of the world, and then we bring them and then we localize them using the data that is shared, and then we can build more systems that are there that would allow us to be able to sort of like cap the impact that this climate has on the local, or sort of like get early warning systems so that we can then manage the impact that this data sharing system climate have on these small scale farms. And then the other role, if we sort of like, because in most cases, you would find out that for some regions, data is non-existent. Like, for example, if you talk data on smallholder farms, if you are looking for yields, for example, data, that data is non-existent. So what happens is that whatever decision that has to be taken with regards to the small-scale farm would be based on something else because the data is not there. So with these platforms, it allows us to be able to sort of like make an informed decisions, because the farmers now would be able to share their own data within the platforms, and the decision makers, it becomes easier for them now to take informed decisions because of the data that is already collated into this one big platform that is shared between the spaces, and then would then be able to sort of like take decisions that are more related or more relevant to the speakers. I am concluding, Chair. And then, yeah, so that's also transfer. Okay, so basically also this one talks to more onto the data sharing platforms and their roles in which they can actually help us in co-creation of some of the frameworks to protect the outputs or to enhance the yields that we would get from the farming activities that are done by these small-scale farms. So with this, it becomes easier for us to be able to co-create decision support systems that are there. Currently, what we are faced with at the South African National Space Agency is that we are trying to build this system decision support tool that would monitor crops and farms at a small scale, farms within the deep rural areas. But now the challenge is when we are building these models that are sort of like allowing us to be able to predict these indicators, we are somehow faced with the challenges of the data, because there's no data at local scale that does that. And it becomes difficult for some of us for one time to actually go and travel and collect that data. So with these data shared spaces, then it would be sort of like open a platform for us to be able to access the data and build this system or co-create these systems, and then that would help us to sort of like create good things that would help and speaks directly to the local farms that we are having in the region. So in summary, the Africa and Europe interoperable data spaces don't just enable the information exchange, they build bridges of trust, innovation, and shared values, which I think my colleague has already explained that in detail when he was actually showing how this, how is the framework of these interoperable spaces is looking like, and how is the data being shared, and also how it then brings, it allows more innovations to actually happen. And also by combining the Europe experiences with Africa, with African reality, we can then co-create most of these farmer-centric, fair future digital agricultural agricultural ecosystems that empowers the smallholder farmers to thrive, not just to survive. Thank you so much.
Well done. Great.
Good morning, everybody. It's a real honor to be here today, covering a subject that I am very passionate about, which is the interoperable data spaces and resources that can serve agriculture and transform us into a new space. So I'm Tara Sadi from Tritom, originally from Stellenbosch University, and Tritom today is a forward farming solution. We integrate terrain and climate data to serve farmers down to farm and field level. And we focus on harnessing technology for more resilient agriculture. Shaping agriculture of the future starts by looking at, from forecast to field, using cutting-edge technology, verified ground truth data, just want to emphasize that, to revolutionize agriculture for decision-making. The problem we face in agriculture and the problem we're trying to serve as Tritom is securing food and economic security in South Africa and Africa in response to climate change. How do we mitigate? How do we adapt at farm and field level, in the commercial space and in the small-scale farming space? Climatic science is no longer optional. It's foundational to securing food systems for the future. So how trusted interoperable data spaces can connect Africa and Europe to drive sustainable agriculture and innovation is using predictions for better decision-making. So my agenda today is transitioning from the problem that we face, our agricultural impacts that we see, the role of climate science, the importance of data decision, how do we start using intelligence to make more informed decisions, looking at a few case studies, and then why predictions matter and how do we look ahead, looking at innovation through collaboration. So as a start, the problem we face, we're all very well aware of the fact that climate change is a reality. But what I do want to emphasize is the impact of climate change is very different dependent on the region. From a global perspective, these are the national climate stripes or global climate stripes. They transition and just get hotter and hotter. Africa deemed as one of the continents most vulnerable to climate change. And then South Africa at the bottom, we still have these extreme events that come out of blue lines in and amongst the red lines, then darker red lines, then lighter red lines. This shows our climate change vulnerability is seasonal variability. It's not just we're getting hotter. So we are in a new climate, we are hotter, but how do we start aggregating data and be interoperable across spaces to serve the agricultural sector? Projected climate change is also something we look at, and we look at projected changes in temperatures on the left-hand side, projected changes of rainfall. So we're getting the scenario of we're getting drier and we're getting hotter, so that has a direct impact back to the color, the size, the quality, the timing of planting, where should we plant, what is our climate vulnerability, is a question that every farmer in South Africa and Africa should be asking. How do we disseminate that data? One of the other problems we face is data accessibility and data availability. And we start with ground truth, which is our weather station network. If we look on the left-hand side, this is an example of the extent of the Western Cape. In the commercial areas, totally overpopulated with weather stations is the red heat map spots. And the other areas where we could be extending our agricultural practices as the end result of climate change is underrepresented from weather stations. And if we look at our climate profile throughout South Africa, it's very diverse. Again, emphasizing the need for weather stations. So we place these weather stations with key partnerships with local environments. And then the other factor that's available to us, but also sometimes a problem, is remote sensing. So remote sensing has its place, but it needs to be integrated in an interoperable data space, and then it provides a significant amount of value. So back to the agricultural impacts. These are the impacts, these are our headlines over the last few years, is floods, heat, it's too darn hot, crop losses, significant impact on the agricultural sector. And how do we mitigate this? By actually understanding the problem and the pain that we face, which is agriculture in uncertain times. More than ever, we need access to data to inform better decision making. We see increased climate variability, there's water scarcity, There's a significant drive on higher input costs, unpredictable diseases, pest outbreaks, pressure on yields and profitability. So these are the problems we face. And how do we start serving farmers to manage their crops with more detail to ensure future fit agriculture and that the investment that you make to plant something is worthy of sustainability? So nowhere to go, nowhere to grow is the motto of Terraclim, to start understanding how do we shift and start providing data to identify what should you plant where and when should you plant. So looking at Terraclim has spent a lot of time to get to a solution, which is access to climate data. We look at data-driven strategies and our adaptations. So we centralize data into one centralized climate database. We build key partnerships with weather station data custodians, currently working with a lot of private sector weather stations, now starting to work across private public sector, which is extremely exciting because this is what's going to transform Africa, is if we can start sharing data in a safe environment. So Jurgen, it was really interesting the way that you showed us how we could share data. So we as Terraclim take this data set, and this is not using remote sensing at this point. Remote sensing gets used as a covariate, but we take these weather station points, and we've spent more than 10 years looking at how do we develop spatial interpolation methods to integrate this data set with 5-meter and 2-meter digital elevation models, which is a model of the Earth's surface. And then we create the terrain derivatives on the right-hand side, your slope, your aspect, your distance to coast, variables that have a direct correlation with temperature. And we run models, and then we create temperature profiles. And we create this on an hourly basis. Hourly data is more important than it's ever been before because hourly data links right back to plant physiology, pest disease, movement, and having access to that is what's needed to inform decision making. And as you can see, the wheel on the top right-hand corner, you can see when a site or a region or an area cools down, when does it heat up, and that links back to the plant's capacity to produce crops. Then we transition these maps, which is every hour of every day you've got a map, into bioclimatic indices. And on the right-hand side, this is an example of the Western Cape. You can see the representation of chill units. Chill units is really important for the expression of growth in high chill crops such as plums, citrus, apples. And the white areas is generally where they plant grain, potatoes, and wine. And you can see what the seasonal variability is that we face. 1 year is more blue, 1 year is less blue, and this needs to be quantified. So we quantify this into risk assessment maps, and you can see the darker red areas where you see a 300-unit difference in chill, and that provides insights as to those areas are going to require more input costs, more diligent management, as well as more defined selection as to what crops will be planted. And then we integrate all of this data, which ends up being more than 44 environmental parameters, into a centralized environment, and this is the key for me is integrated data sets. It's not looking at one and the highest resolution. It's looking at integrating value and looking at different crop types. So here in this map, we've got the green, which is grapes. We've got citrus, which is the orange, and then pears, which is the purple. And starting to look at how does climate impact that, and using winning crops to create profiles that can dictate where can it be planted in the future. And we start getting these maps. So what grain cultivar works where, what potato cultivar works where, what wine grape cultivar works where, and this pushes premiumization in the industry, pushes sustainability and economic sustainability. So the question that we ask is how far can we adapt? Crops have a natural plasticity, crops do adapt. When are the climate conditions exceeding that specific threshold, and when do we fall out? And how can these results compromise production, economic losses? So the solution to that is getting access to hourly data, integrating research and know-how. It's not just about building massive data banks. We need researchers across platforms to start collaborating with insights, to start extracting that from data sets. So one of the ways that we're doing that is Terraclim provides a Terraclim web app. We have an API for all these data sets. Then we've got consultancy and research, and then we've got a suitability tool. So in consultancy and research is we use all these large data sets to start looking at what does hours above 35 look like throughout South Africa. And you can see that's a map that's shifting season to season. And here it is extracted over the different production regions. And across all production regions, you can see the impact of seasonal variability. If we look at an area Eastern Cape, Western Cape, Northern Cape, 2024 at a significant amount of hours above 35. But then it also comes down to this data is a so what, unless we start understanding what was the yield in that year, what was the pest and disease movement, what is the expression in the crop, and linking that back, and that's where we start becoming robust and building models for the future. An example of rainfall, you can see the sporadic variation in rainfall over the different production regions. Here's the volume of rainfall, and just how different. All of them is almost a bell curve. Same for hours between 22 and 32. This is an example on the right-hand side, some of our main potato producing areas, and you can see the risk of, well, not the risk, but the variation in what potato cultivar as a potato industry are you going to plant in these different areas. Free State has a lot more hours between 22 and 32, optimal growth window for potatoes, and then Limpopo less, but Sunveld even less. So it's considering what do you plant where based on the environmental profiling. Hours below 7, which is indicating back to our frost indicators. And then here's an example of using the data in a specific production area of Limpopo, where we look at early planting, main harvest, late harvest, and an image as to what the rainfall looks like over multiple seasons, and then a standard deviation of where the areas that are showing more risk for planting in specific windows. And this can be used to better stagger your planting dates. Again, speaking to potato farmers, they're like, we don't care about rainfall in Limpopo. We want to know what is the water sources for planting in Limpopo. So all of this data is extremely valuable, but you need those additional insights to add value to the data to inform decision making. Another example of the potato production areas, which then breaks down to, this is hours above 35, which is unfavorable for tuber growth. Then at the bottom, you see the risk assessment. An area like Limpopo, and the upper areas in Limpopo, high risk for hours above 35, which has an impact on potato growth. So you would choose your window of potato planting with more detail than what you would in Free State and Sunveld. So then the Terraclim web app, just very simply, it's a profile that we've created, an environment that any farmer can go in and profile their farm, digitize it, explore, analyze. What is their climate vulnerability? What is their climate over space and time? What is their NDVI images? What is their terrain derivatives, all the different terrain layers? For a farmer to start understanding his farm spatially, because on farm level, climate is changing. Areas that had high chill units now have low chill units. So this becomes really important for informed decision making. So high resolution layers to inform spatial decision making. They manage their whole profile, so it provides a digital footprint for your land. And then it also provides you with environmental parameters. What was this season compared to last season, compared to 5 years ago? That if a farmer sees this season's growing degree days is similar to 5 years ago, they in their heads exactly know how that season panned out, and they can prepare for that. So I'm going to go a little bit faster. We also have field notes where we want to start collecting data. The biggest problem in the agricultural sector is lack of digital footprint. We don't know what's planted where and when it is planted. So no matter how much data we have in these data interoperable spaces, we need to know where crops are operating and how they're operating. Then we've developed a suitability tool where we use data-driven insights, winning crops to dictate where should we plant for the future, and then linking that with a whole lot of research and development that's been done. And what that comes out as, you select 2 fields on a farm, and it provides you with the top 10 variables out of 44 that's linked to wine grape production. Then you have different variables that link to potato production and plum production. And then it gives you a suitability score as to you should plant pinotage there as 100%. Both these sites were pinotage, but then you can see the percentages change a little bit but based on what should you plant on the specific site. And this is what growers want to see. They want one click to tell them what to do. And then we create suitability maps. We've also done this with potatoes. I've got 3 minutes left, so I'm going to go fast because I actually want to get to the SASM project. So in the potato industry, we looked at extracting data for multiple climate variables linked to potatoes, again, emphasizing the need for research insights, linking it back to mass sold and value sold. We looked at different cultivars and different planting times, so autumn, spring, summer. And then within that, we saw in the Sunveld area, they should plant mondial in summer if they want better production. Spring and autumn, they should consider Sifra, Mondial, and Lemora. Avalanche, Valor, and Van der Planck, other cultivars, don't have the capability to adapt to the climate conditions, which is seasonal variability, which is extreme temperatures between day and night. And that's very interesting for the potato industry. We did the same thing for plums, looking at 3 different plum cultivars, trying to ensure that the plum industry stays economically viable, not planting the wrong plum cultivar in the wrong place. African Delight, Angelino, Sun Gold, these are the similarity and suitability maps based on winning plum cultivars. The green areas is where you should plant that plum cultivar. You can see African Delight, it's got a very small area where you should plant it, whereas Sun Gold, you can plant it anywhere. The background data there is extracting a whole lot of model feature importance. What's interesting for us is rain, temperatures between 15 and 20 is important for African Delight. Humidity is important for Angelino, as is humidity, but then temperatures below 18 is important for the other cultivars. So it's understanding what is important for cultivars, and this can be done through data insights, just extracting the data based on 20 sites where it's winning. And yeah, I hope that makes sense. I'm trying to rush here. 2, SASSIM, South Africa's System of Systems to Modernize Agriculture. And this was initiated by the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation, where they brought different entities within their consortium, within their environment together so that we could start building a consortium to look at how can we aggregate our data to democratize access to agricultural intelligence. And this is a really exciting project where we've created an interface that farmers can access. What this interface looks like is you have a farm dashboard, you select a specific field, and then it extracts data from the consortium. It extracts data from Agricultural Research Council, which have done a phenomenal amount of research on climate, drought indexes, stress indexes. CSIR, the PIAS system with remote sensing, provides phenomenal insights with soil pH, planting information, when was planted, how is the growth of the crop going, and then Terraclim, the climate insights, the crop suitability. So if a farmer anywhere in the Eastern Cape, is our first pilot study, selects a field, he gets an overview of the crop is potatoes, the suitability for potatoes is high, it was last updated, and then it gives you an indicator of the soil moisture. It provides you with what is the generalized climate information, and then you take this to the weather conditions for that specific site, and then we look at maps for that specific site, and then we look at who can this farmer, from a resource perspective, contact the nearest technical advisor, but also get access to crop calendars and all of that. This is a lot of information, so we make it more accessible by putting a chatbot, which is interoperable with different languages, onto this. So the chatbot would respond to this information that's been extracted for that specific site, linking to that specific farmer scenario. And that's very transformative to inform agriculture and decision making. And yeah, just to close off, prediction matters. We're going from guesswork into informed decision making, and for that we need data, but we need intelligence from different researchers. Traditional farming was reactive. We are today in a scenario where we need to be proactive. The best way to become proactive, put data in the local context, and that's putting data in the hands of the farmer or the technical advisors. So looking ahead, AI and innovation for climate resilient farming is empowering farmers for future farming solutions, hourly data, continually updated data, pest and disease monitoring, risk assessments, what is your dynamic bioclimatic indices, what is your climate vulnerability, and that is what we're wanting to extricate and provide to the agricultural sector. So all of this data aligns with the SDGs, which is zero hunger, clean water sanitation, decent work and economic growth, industry innovation, climate action, and life on your land. Partnerships for these different goals, strengthening a cross-border collaboration. And in South Africa, there's so much opportunity in Africa, where globally 60% of uncultivated land lies in Africa. 70% of agriculture supports livelihoods in Africa. 52% of people work in agriculture in Africa. So agriculture is the heartbeat of the economy. And we need to invest in this, we need to equip it, and we need to centralize data to inform decision making and build partnerships. When science meets soil, resilience grows. Together, we can secure South Africa's food future. from forecast to field. Thank you very much. Was I going to sit there?
All right. Thank you very much, Tara. So we are now entering the question and answer session. Colleagues, I think we need to just allow our panelists, panel of speakers to please join us here in the front so that they can. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you. If you can please come up here, colleagues, and then take your questions from the audience. You can sit in any order, it's fine. You can also sit in the order in which you presented out. Okay, so colleagues, in the interest of time, we would like to really just have fair distribution of questions for all speakers. Are you okay with that? The light over there. Are you okay now?
Yeah, it's fine.
It's fine. Okay. So by a show of hands, let us take the first round of questions. Okay, thank you. My brother there in the back. Second question. Third question there. Okay, let's take them in that order. 1, 2, 3. So in yesterday's session, I tried to say equity with the ladies, and I like it that there's a lady asking a question as well.
Thank you very much.
If you can please also tell us who you are, and so the organization you represent.
Test.
Thank you very much. I'm Aaron Maepa, and I'm representing an NPO called Harona Community Development Center. We are dealing with issues related to GBV and empowerment of women in general. So we also have small-scale farming in our organization to empower the survivors of GBV. My question will go to all the panelists. I believe you indicated that you don't really have data for small-scale farmers. And one of the colleagues said Africa is a farming continent. So my question is there anything that you are doing to identify those small-scale farmers, so that you can actually have an updated data set regarding the small-scale farmers in South Africa specifically? I think that's the question that I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Should we answer? No, let's take the three questions together, and then we'll respond.
Hi, folks. I've got a couple questions directed to a couple. Yes, I was going to get there. My name is Max Fischlik. I am a director of an advisory and an asset manager called Impact Amplifier. So in a former life, I ran a farmer management system in 17 African countries. My firm also currently manages about 2,500 smallholder farmers with external farmer management systems, and then we're also an investor in Abelobi, and so we're also an impact investor. So we've done a fair amount of work. So Tara, really loved your presentation. Amazing work, like incredible. Like I can just see, and that you're really geared commercially as well, which is great. I also have some land up in the Cederberg, and what I'm noticing is the real expansion of fruit going up that part of the Western Cape. Isn't there a little bit of a corollary where, on the one end, your solution's very geared towards climate adaptation and helping farmers where to grow and how to grow, but at the same time, those farmers are growing quite unsustainably? If I look at our land, we've had to set aside a nature reserve because of the amounts of crop spraying, and so I wanted to get a sense of, are you changing potentially, or seeking to change maybe how farmers do grow to get more yield, maybe in more regenerative practices that kind of enhance that climate side? Second, on CEADS, I think your frustration to smallholder farmers getting data, I think, is felt. My sense is, and this is a question to you, that I don't think smallholder farmers in Africa are your users. I think aggregators, agronomists are your users who will then take that insights to smallholder farmers, just given the lack of mobility. So I want to get a sense of, are you providing wholesale data to companies like Tara's, to aggregators who then have the apps and the solutions that are finding their ways into farmers' hands? So more of a B2B sort of engagement than B2C. And then lastly, Jürgen, your data operability, for some weird reason, I know some Flemish law and how backward in the 19th century it is to do anything on land or any change on land. Is there any way that you're shifting potentially government systems around how you get permitting, how you don't have to get permits to so many different local government agencies, spend huge amounts of money for farmers? Because I think red tape locally for farmers is probably the biggest issue, which you mentioned.
Thank you very much. There's another question on this side. The lady there.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Makosiwa Misunkwana, Queen of Herbs, better known as Elizabeth Lehabe, from Remokose Youth and Women Empowerment Project, which born Ria Web Naturals. We are dealing with research, development of herbal products. I've got a few questions here. The first one is, how is CIR and other stakeholders supporting small herbal innovators and indigenous knowledge holders transition their product from research to market, especially in complementary and alternative medicine space? The second one says, what opportunities exist for collaboration between CSIR and other stakeholders, scientists, and traditional herbal entrepreneurs to validate and develop indigenous plant-based formulations for health and wellness? Why am I saying this? Is because I've studied that drugs, more especially, they've tested with white people when they were doing plant cells, and 1% is black people. So white react positively to the drugs, whereas most of the blacks does not respond. And as I heard the second and the third speakers, as you are collecting the data, within my research, I've noticed that let me quote one of the herbs called dandelion. What is written in the research, as I am a traditional healer and using the dandelion, is not what is written there. And also the names We do, in the Google, for instance, the names of the plants, they are not there in our language. And you interpret it wrong. We are using those medicines and they are, or plants, and they are doing well in our bodies. So how are you collaborating with us? Who has that knowledge? Who can give you the data that you are looking for? And how are we collaborating to use the Asian knowledge with today's modern language, modern system? Number three.
Can we cut it there, Mama, so that we can give others a chance? And I will then ask my CSIR colleagues to also respond to you, and maybe also have another session with you outside, because I think yesterday you left early, and there was a DSTI colleague in a session that followed at 4 p.m. That colleague was speaking specifically on indigenous knowledge systems. And this talk today is about data spaces, not necessarily IKS. So we will note your questions. We may not be able to respond fully to them in this session because none of the speakers here are experts in the area of your inquiry. But I have my colleague here, Prof. Tse, who is the Acting Impact Area Manager for Agro-Manufacturing. IKS falls under his area of responsibility. Here is another colleague here, Luambo, Dr. Luambo. He is an IKS specialist and ethnobotanist. He will also speak to you. And because I don't think any of these speakers here will be able to answer the question. Is that fair? You left early yesterday, and but there are people that can address your areas of interest. Okay, thank you very much. So basically there are two questions that you will address. Audiences, I think it's fair that we refer the IKS question to the margins of this session. Thank you very much. So let's start with your responses.
Yeah, okay.
They want to record. They want to record. The AV colleagues need it for recording. Yes, it is. Otherwise, you can stand here.
Okay, thank you so much for the questions. I'm going to try and answer the two questions that were directed to the presentation that I gave. The first question, which spoke on what is it that we are doing to improve the data that we claim that it's not there. I'm sure I got the question. I don't know if I got the question. Yes, for the small-scale farms. So, okay, yeah, we firstly, when we develop these systems and models, we try by so means that we can integrate whatever knowledge and information that is available from these small-scale farms. But now what we are doing as the custodian for the Earth observations data, we sort of like rely from whatever data that we can get that is collected from the satellites to supplement or to sort of like use that data with the knowledge that we get or data that we get that is sort of like scanty to non-existent. We sort of like do integrate these two types of data to come up with products that would then allow us to be able to take better decisions relating to the farming activities that the small-scale farmers are basically dealing with. For example, we have projects that we are having that are in pilot areas, like in the Vembe district, like in the KZN area, that focus on different crop types where we are doing crop water requirements and water use. We are hoping to build a system on that using, we are using various data sources, including your Earth observation data collected by the satellite, and integrating it with the data that we are collecting from the small-scale projects that we are having with the farmers, where we can be able to access the data to improve that. Of course, we cannot compensate the field data with the Earth observations data, but we can somehow bring these two types of data to work hand in hand to sort of like improve the outputs that we can get, and then the decisions that we are going to make out of those outputs can then be informed. So that is what we are doing. And then The other one, it talks more into the provisions of data to stakeholders like TerraClaim. So yes, we do work with stakeholders, as I indicated when I started my presentation, that we are the custodian for the Earth observations data. So we are sort of like, we gather the data and then we disseminate the data into different organs of states. So the people that we have MOUs with, we do distribute the data based on the details on the agreements within the MOUs. So we do somehow provide them, but we are sort of like big onto, rather than giving the stakeholders data, let's come together and co-create these products that are based on this data, because I am going to be bringing the Earth observations data, you are bringing your type of data, and then we can see how can we then synchronize this data and put it together into a system that would allow us to be able to come up with this big chain of systems or whatever that we are trying to produce that can allow us to be able to take better decisions that we are thinking. So we do somehow work with these people, but we also need the people that are experiencing the problems and challenges that we are facing, which are the farmers at the ground level, because they are the ones that are actually going to give us the data that we need, or the information or detailed information that we need. For example, if we talk about infestation by fall armyworm, they are the people that are dealing with fall armyworm at the day-to-day basis, rather than having these middlemen. So interacting more with them, it becomes easier for us to be able to identify the source of problem and then propose a solution based on what we observed and what they observe onto the field.
Thank you, Sia. Okay, so let's go to Tara and then we'll come to you, Jürgen.
Great. Aaron, thank you for your question. I think for us within the SASM project, it's been working across the public-private sector and finding ways to aggregate data that's in a decentralized format. The key to collecting data from a small-scale farming community is central to actually making those tools of the greatest value to that province. So what we've done with SASM is we're taking it province by province. So currently we're working in the Eastern Cape province. The project is now scaling to KwaZulu-Natal. And just even looking at how the provinces and the technical advisors operate is very different. So it's really important to take these tools and hear what is the farmer saying, what is the technical advisor saying. So we work in the Eastern Cape with the Department of Eastern Cape and work with the technical advisors and the different groups, and within the Eastern Cape, all the different municipalities are also operating very differently. So those are the barriers we're having to cross step by step within the SASM project. So like I said in my presentation, it's one thing centralizing data, it's another thing to disseminate that centralized data in an effective, value-add, insight form. So our aim is to work with certain groups and take these data sets to a group, like your group, you mentioned the Women Empowerment Group, and there are other projects that are running in the Eastern Cape, and actually say, what else do you need in the SASM tool to make it more efficient and operationable? So at the moment, the key data insights are coming from TerraClaim, CSIR, and ARC. And Moses is here, Professor Moses, representing Pius. He can give some insights on, from a remote sensing perspective, what we're pulling into the tool. So we're trying to also make the data as accessible as possible, so not making it this high level stack of data. And so I hope that answers the question. We'd love to speak to you afterwards and collaborate. And yeah, you could be one of the custodians that tests SASM for us. We're looking for testers. And then Max, relating to your question with regard to agriculture shifting into new areas, a lot of scenarios is just people plundering forward. That plum presentation was an example. And significant investment is made, but planting something in a suboptimal location results in excessive spray, other interventions, which are actually, it's unnecessary because there's an array of crop types that they can choose from to plant. I mean, it could be nuts, it could be cash crops, it could be herbs, it could be anything. And it's to start looking at how do we effectively mitigate in a specific area or adapt in an area. So we also work a lot with WWF and look at establishing corridors within agricultural areas. And a lot of farmers don't know where the original the corridor should be. They don't know where wetlands should be. So it's been phenomenal to see some farmers start transitioning into more regenerative practices. And no matter what we say about climate, remote sensing, data centralized informations, everything comes back to the soil. You have to get your soil healthy. You have to get that, because that is your buffer capacity for any plant that you plant. And our water systems, how do we navigate and manage our water systems on a larger scale? At the moment, water systems is managed municipality by municipality. It's not in a centralized environment, and that's something that we really need to move forward in agriculture. And yeah, the reason why they're moving into areas like Ceres is because it's a slightly higher elevation, which means the temperature is slightly cooler. So it's a natural climate change shift, and those are the things. We move in those areas, but what are the ramifications once we've shifted into that area? No shift comes without its barriers and adaptations.
Thank you. So Jürgen?
Yes, well, I think on the question of the small-scale farmers, it's difficult for me, of course, to assess, because small-scale farmer, it's a word that you use, but how is it defined when you speak in my ecosystem? Because actually, for us in Flanders, there are only small-scale farmers, because real large farms does not exist in Flanders, because I didn't speak about our agricultural system, but we have very scattered lands. But of course, what we call small is probably still might be not what you mean by very small farmers, I suppose. So, but for us, anyway, our systems work for all farmers officially registered in Flanders. So if you are a farmer registered as a farmer, whether you are a very small farm doing it even not very professionalized and just as an extra job on the side, or you are one, what is then maybe would be big for us, having 800 hectares of potatoes, for instance, which is then a big player in Flanders. All of them are accommodated, and their data can be used. Mainly because, and that is a very important reason why our platform survives. We have a very good relation with the government, and I didn't elaborate on that, but we are a neutral platform, and my institute is a public-private institute that takes responsibility for this platform. Our board, the decision takers, is led by farmer cooperatives. So the ones that support us, that help us taking decisions where to go, are all farmer cooperatives. So we put always the farmer first, and we have their support. We also have the support of the government, because we also have a public part in Ilvo. So we are a very neutral player, being able to be acceptable for a very small farmer towards a very professionalized farmer. And I think if you ever want to move in these systems, the support of the government is nearly impossible. I will maybe elaborate a little bit too much, but stop me if we have been thinking many times, or there are possibilities to do these platforms purely private. But I have to be honest, a platform like ours, to keep it in the air, the first 5-7 years, you will not make any profit. You will have to invest, till all farmers are connected, till you have a lot of data, and then you can start talking to companies. Now we have a lot of value, and now we can start earning some money. Investing money for 5 years or more, how many actors can do that? It's not that a small startup can keep it up for 5 or 6 years. Only large players can keep it up. So if you look at platforms like Airbnb or the big platforms, they have been making losses for many years until they have a tremendous amount of users, and then you ask just $1 for one user and you start making money. My point is, small neutral players cannot keep this up. You need the support of a government who gives you some support, or you have to be a very, very large hyperscaler in IT, like the Googles of this world. And then it's up to you or your country to decide who are you wanting to give the lead. So for us, we see data as a utility company. It means, like we had the electricity, like we have the water, it was also put the wires in the ground, the water to the houses. It's not done in the beginning by private companies. All these investments have been made by the government. And then later, at least for me, we try to privatize this. But the beginning, the investments are made by public authorities. And we see it a little bit the same for data. Setting up the structure, setting up the platform, the government needs to help with that. And later, when it becomes sustainable, you can look to privatization of these systems. That's for a little bit how we relate to small farmers. Then about the red tape, we have a very interesting concept. It's called Ask Only Once. To the times that you were referring, I suppose it didn't exist yet, but that means you ask a farmer for certain information only one time as a government, and afterwards you need to reuse it each time. So if several governments need, departments like environment or agriculture need the same information, there's one, we call it a locket, one place where the information is, and it needs to flow into the new department so that you don't need to do it over and over again. And our platform is, of course, tremendously helping with that, because it makes sure that if the farmer gives his data one time, we feed it to all the different places where he needs to have a license, where he needs to comply with certain rules. So that is actually our unique selling point to take it away from the farmer. And what we also see is that we get a very step-by-step professionalization of farming. I mean, farming in our country is not anymore a one-man business. The data alone, actually you should have a data officer, you should have an environmental officer, you have a legal officer. So one guy with his wife, it's not possible anymore. Sometimes the sun helps, but more and more we see that we are getting professionalized companies, even sometimes coming from retail, that are starting their own companies and supporting farmers with doing this tremendous investment and this tremendous complexity, because a one-man company having the investments that need to be done, it's very difficult, and it puts a lot of pressure on a one-man company. Okay. One-woman company, to stay in the equity.
Thank you very much, colleagues. We have run out of time. Moses, I see there are two more hands there. So I hope you're answering the question that came. Is it possible to do this collaboration? And what would be the next steps? So you can speak on behalf of yourself and your organization and the precision agriculture program that you run, and you can speak on behalf of the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation, at least to advise how you're going to enable it. SANSA seems to want it. TerraClim seems to say there's opportunity. And of course, ILVO has come here to say, this is what we do, can we work together? So that would be the points you can speak to colleagues. And is there any other questions that I might be? Okay, there are two more at the back. Okay.
In the interest of time, thanks. I think, Jürgen, very brilliant work and presentation. First simple question is, you're working already with 4,000 farmers out of 20,000, about a quarter or a fifth. What are the sort of challenges getting farmers on board the system? And for Tara, I got the concept of API shop or shopping from Jürgen's platform. Is it something that SASAM project we can learn from or adopt? And their business model, how do you see it and reflect a little bit on that? And then the short question to Sansa was, are you working with other players, ARC, CSIR, or are you checking into whether you're duplicating some efforts? But to Jürgen, I think from the perspective of the CSIR, I think it would be great to work with you. Thanks.
Okay, let's give it to Maneshu. Colleagues, our tea break is 15 minutes, and the other team needs to come in and upload their presentations. I was just checking that with our comms team. So unfortunately, DSTR, if you can please give us your concluding kind of remarks from a government department perspective, and the other colleagues, can we take your questions maybe outside? Apologies.
Thanks very much, Dr. Moteti, for the opportunity. And thanks very much to all the speakers for a very exciting session. I think we are really open to partnering and discussing with Jürgen how the ILVO program as an NPO could also assist us, because it's, at the end of the day, it's about the bigger connectivity. And I think those issues become pertinent in terms of how do you navigate, because of the SASM project, once we're done, we piloted, how do we navigate and leverage off other data spaces which will make that further impact in terms of sustainability, the value chains. And we're already talking to Potato South Africa, which has a much bigger data set and you know, extends their work to even logistics, supply chain, return on investment profits. So that sustainability element and working with the individual innovation value chains as per our strategy within the agricultural bioeconomy and the decadal plan is really about that. What is the importance of that, those data sets is making those impact. So also perhaps I need to perhaps speak on behalf of our space colleagues. There's definitely a connectivity between what SANSA does and what PIES does. And they use some of the same data sets. And I think in terms of the strategy, it's about how they also need to be working with us together and looking at the other elements that we cannot look at in the SASM project or within the PIES. And I think we're open to also looking at that. So I think all in all, very exciting times in terms of how we navigate space. But I think also the one thing that we must reflect on, our minister spoke yesterday about a sovereign research agenda, and I think we must be cognizant about that. But we must also be cognizant about how do we navigate that space and ensure there is a benefit across all the different players. And I think that's the other point that he made in terms of, you know, for the global partner and the local partner, while we look at what is the real benefit and the impact we can make on a global level for sustainability. That's very critical. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So Maneshri is the Director for Agricultural Bio-Innovation Program at the Department of Science and Technology and Innovation. That's why I was asking her to. So she will take it through even the multilateral and so thank you very much, colleagues. Our session has come to an end, and let us give a round of applause for everyone who participated. Thank you. And we may go for tea and leave the room to Jürgen. So your question has been answered. Your last question on your last slide, right? Yes, it is. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.